What up, Whisper Nation? Big Travie here with a very special guest, writer for the Fantasy Whisper, Matt Potvin, and obviously Johnny Game Time Hicks on the other side. And we're talking news and notes, player news and notes around the NFL right here on the Fantasy Whispers.
Yes, we're back again. We're back again.
Hey, let's pump up the volume.
Right here.
All right, that's right, Whisper Nation. We are here, excited to bring Matt on with us here. You may recognize Matt Potvin as a writer for the Fantasy Whispers. He just came out with his 2019 top fantasy rookies. Matt, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well.
Right on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. We're having a couple beers here, getting our drink on and discussing the news. It's always fun to get with the buddies, crack a couple brews, and talk some fantasy football. Johnny, how you doing over there in Phoenix today?
Oh, it's a little bit hot outside.
Shocker.
Yeah, right. I'm doing pretty well. It's my Friday, so I don't yet have a beer, but I do have my, you know me. I have my NOS energy drink, and I'm ready to go, dude. I'm excited. There's a lot of news that came out this week, so I'm excited to talk to Matt about it. When us three get together, we are also in our league of record together, so it's always really fun banter between all three of us. So I'm excited to have Matt on the show. Matt, you want to let Whisper Nation know where they can find you on Twitter?
I have a stagnant Twitter profile. It's MP Fantasy Sports. If you're gonna find me, you can find me on Instagram mostly at Mateo Rex, Mateo_Rex.
He's a great follow there.
Terrible name, but
great follow.
Great follow.
I think we gotta note that Matt he was a little bit reluctant to take on the Fantasy Whisper name, so he went with the Fantasy Sports little tagline there on his Twitter account. But that's okay.
He's reluctant to take on the name. He was reluctant to even post on Twitter. So
we that's French for yes.
All right, well, let's hop into this, guys. Obviously, really free-flowing. We're just going to kind of go through some of the news and notes, talk a little bit of fantasy, talk a little bit of strategy for this year, maybe jump into Matt's article a little bit. But I'm going to start us off here reading John Ross. Obviously, we'll be reading a lot of this from RotoWorld and SleeperBot, so please check those out for your news sources. They're great. We love following them. But John Ross of the Cincinnati Bengals, the Athletics' Jay Morrison, reports that John Ross has struggled with consistency during spring practices. Guys, I want to open this up by starting to say, John Ross, with this Zach Taylor offense that's coming in, they want to mimic the Rams. They want to try and have these wide receiver sets where they can have multiple wide receivers. John Ross is a guy that people have been screaming out to break out here, and now we're seeing more signs that he's been inconsistent. People wanted him to kind of fill that Brandon Cooks role for this offense. Are you seeing this as just a little bit of noise, or is this more par for the course for John Ross? Matt, you want
to? Full disclosure, I don't think John Ross is a good fit for the Bengals offense. I don't feel that he fits the skill set of Andy Dalton. I feel that, obviously he's more of a vertical threat burner. He's not one of those guys that you really are trying to, give a 5-10 yard pass to and make guys miss.
Yeah, he's got like the one thing.
Right. I mean,
toolbox, right?
if you can obviously get him the ball in space, he can make things happen. But I just don't think he's like a good fit for the offense. And, this article saying that he has struggled with consistency and still having trouble picking up the offense, I think is just a reflection of that.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Well, I think they also have they have Tyler Boyd, who kind of emerged as that wide receiver too last year. And I don't think they expected that. So I think they drafted John Ross expecting him to be that number 2. And when Tyler Boyd kind of took over and he's showing that he could be a very, very solid wide receiver for them, it kind of put Ross behind the 8 ball here. And he's trying to play catch up, and he clearly is not that type of receiver to be able to say, I have what it takes to be the number 1 or the solid number 2 like Tyler Boyd has.
Right. I mean, I think reflective, if you think of like Kenny Stills going, the Saints to Miami and actually having an opportunity to be a contributor. I see Ross in a similar situation where obviously, Kenny Stills is not really having an impact on the Saints with so many other surrounding, casts, so much, around him, that he has a better opportunity to be a role player for the Dolphins. I mean, John Ross maybe going somewhere where he can be better involved, somewhere that there's probably a little bit thinner depth at the position. I think would be more.
And then maybe even a more skilled, like I like what you said earlier about Andy game.
Yeah.
Maybe if you had a more skilled quarterback who could spread the ball around more, you may see John Ross get into a system where he could be used a little bit better.
Right.
Are you saying the Red Rocket doesn't do anything for you?
Isn't Red
Rifle?
Yeah.
Oh.
Johnny's trying. He's got a couple.
Red Rocket.
That's for a different show.
Yeah.
Sorry. My bad.
But speaking of red, the Red Sea out there in your guys' town of Phoenix, Christian Kirk of the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. So Cliff Kingsbury was talking about Kirk the other day. Says he has a good feel for the offense. There's no shortage of hype building around Kirk right now, especially this offense. We'll just start there. The Arizona offense is being hyped up really well right now. And why not, right? You have a very offensive minded guy coming in. You have a great running back in DJ. You have a very electric quarterback in Kyler Murray. We've yet to see what he could do in the NFL, but I want to hear what your guys' take as Cardinal fans on Christian Kirk and this wide receiving.
I mean, I like the talent that was drafted. Obviously, my feelings about,
Well, yeah, we know your feelings about Kyler Murray, but maybe share with the Whisper Nation.
I'll share. Christian Kirk here. I think Christian Kirk here is it was a solid pick. I love people coming from hometowns and fulfilling that role for their hometown team. I mean, you look at like Philip Lindsay being a Denver kid and how prized he is on that team and how proud he is to be a part of that team. And I feel Christian Kirk is the same, feeling some sort of sense of belonging for, his hometown team. And I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to improve upon last year and boost those numbers. If you look at the overall draft strategy of the Cardinals this past season or this past draft, they took quite a few offensive players. You have Keyshawn Johnson, you have Isabella. Now you have Christian Kirk coming into his second year, sophomore year at the Cardinals, and obviously Hakeem Butler. But I mean, that's it's not a wide receiver.
What?
Yeah, Hakeem Butler's for the Cardinals. Yeah.
Okay.
They drafted him as well. Yeah, big tall guy, same size as N'Keal Harry.
Okay, I'm thinking. So I mean, they have plenty of guys. I mean, some of these guys are probably not going to even be able to make the starting lineup. But I really like Isabella. I like Christian Kirk. I like them all to start building chemistry with the young quarterback. I don't feel very strongly about Kyler Murray. I don't, and mainly for the reason that it's not that it's necessarily he lacks the talent. A lot of the hype that right now that is being shown or being displayed is mainly just that. We've seen what he does, and like the pedigree came from a very prestigious school, and he had a lot of big games, produced in a lot of big games, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily translate at the NFL level. Also, like no quarterback in the Super Bowl era with his specific type of skill set has won the Super Bowl, outlier being Russell Wilson. And the reason why Russell Wilson, I believe, won that Super Bowl wasn't because of his offensive ability, but definitely because of the defense. I mean,
and just for perspective on Matt's point there, Seattle's defense was being compared to that of the 85 Bears in a lot of instances because of how good they were. So it's not a knock on Russell. He's definitely a great offensive threat.
Right.
But at the same time that he's flowered and that defense has gone down, Seattle hasn't made any more deep runs to the Super Bowl.
And at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to necessarily I have joked about his height. Who hasn't joked about his height? At the end of the day, like, what's going to really be the defining moment, Kyler Murray, as far as whether he does actually succeed on that team, is his decision making.
Mm-hmm. But that's what's great about the air raid, right? Because air raid essentially takes the decision making out of the play, because you look at the defense and based on what the defense is giving you, which guy to go to. And it's not that you have to wait necessarily for this guy to get open. It's like he will get open based on the formations. So
I don't necessarily like that comparison because, like, you don't want to wait until some guy gets open. That's going to end up leading to turnovers.
Well,
I understand where you're coming from. I just think that I don't know. I just think that this first year is going to be very telling of what we're going to be able to see from him, and if obviously Arizona has high expectations. The fans in Arizona, they have high expectations.
Super Bowl or bust, baby.
Exactly. I'm not saying Super Bowl or bust. I mean, if they go 500 or
well,
above,
let me ask you this.
Matt,
you're alluding to the high expectations. And on the flip side of that coin, as a fan, and we should talk about this in respect to fantasy a little bit too, but as a fan, do you feel like you are just looking at it through negative goggles, Kyler Murray, just trying
like
to protect
lens,
yourself?
Sense of bias, but that's really not outside of any other fantasy player or any other fan.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, like, I'm sure you've stressed before and multiple other people stress as well is you don't draft your team based upon who you actually like, who you're actually a fan of the team, because that never works out.
Yeah, I feel like when we first started playing fantasy, you see a lot of that, right? You're like, oh, I love the Packers.
Yeah,
draft a ton of them, and then you realize, it can. If the offense is clicking, like a Saints or a Chiefs or a Rams, that you can get multiple pieces of that. It's an interesting point, though. We like to talk about is getting pieces of those elite offenses. And Arizona, as exciting as it is and enticing as these players are, David Johnson is the guy for me. And then past that, you've got to be careful about where you're taking these guys, because it is a brand new offense. It is a rookie head coach. It's a rookie quarterback. And so for me, outside of David Johnson, there's a lot of built-in risk with those guys. Luckily for everyone, Kyler Murray is going late. He's not going as late as Pat Mahomes last year, but he is going late in drafts. I do see him creeping up in drafts, and that could be a dangerous thing to watch, because if you're taking him,
people are pretty much going to be taking him based upon the upside.
Right.
I mean, personally, I wouldn't be taking him as your starting quarterback. I would take him, kind of as a lottery ticket if you're that interested.
Yeah, if you're going to take him as your quarterback, maybe you need to hedge that bet with somebody is going to give you points.
Right. I mean,
but do you really? Because that's the thing about the draft that we live in today, is that there are so many guys on. I mean, Mitch Trubisky is going undrafted, and he had several 50-point games last year. He wasn't drafted last year, and yet people are just leaving him to die like last year was a fluke or something. So it's like, I don't necessarily think you have to hedge your bet, because if he fails, if he's not,
I mean, you definitely don't have to roster two quarterbacks, but if you're gonna be taking Kyler Murray, you better be taking him super late, in my opinion.
Sure.
I don't want to take him within probably, 10 rounds. Just because, like Matt says, he's starting to creep up those boards, and his upside is basically, listen, I'm the first one to say that I think Kyler Murray could finish number one at the position, just based on what he can do. Like, he could, but the risk is there.
Yeah, for sure.
They're there. All right, so let's move on here a little bit to a backfield I want to talk about, not necessarily for this player, but we have Bob Condata of the Seattle Times listed J.D. McKissick as one of three candidates competing to be the Seattle's third down running back. And the only reason I think that this is interesting, Johnny, is because one of the three running backs he lists is not Rashad Penny or Chris Carson. So it looks like Seattle may be doing something where they want three running backs working this backfield consistently, and they're trying to audition that third down back role. Or do we think it's just more Pete Carroll's not showing any kind of hand, and
we see this like literally every year.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We see this every year. This is a non-story. Is essentially what it is. I mean, the real story here for people that are actually interested in Seattle's backfield is exactly what people have been deciding between, and it's Kris Carson and Rashad Penny. And I think J.D. McKissic will probably most likely take that third down role if that's the way they decide to play it
for week 1, and then he'll get hurt.
If that's the way they obviously, if that's the way they decide to play it. CJ Procise, that guy is probably
injured right now.
He's probably injured. He probably
he just heard his name and.
He probably hurt himself, like, sitting down on the toilet or something.
Here's something that I do want to say, because I went on. We had a draft room pod and Summy on our show just last week, and what I will say is he did make a very interesting comment, right? And that's that Seattle wants to have this saddle back. They've always wanted it, but they thought that CJ Procise could be it. But like we talked about, he's just always injured. And now they're trying to say it could be J.D. McKissic. And it's like, here's the big thing. And I agree with Matt wholeheartedly. You're just deciding between Carson and Chris Carson and Penny, because yes, every team wants a certain thing. Every single team wants an elite quarterback. Every single team wants an elite running back. And it's like at some point, all it is wishes and hopes and dreams, and you have to look what they're putting out on the field. And to me, I think it's Carson and Penny. Those are the two.
Let me ask you this: like, out of those two, like Carson and Penny, which one would you rather have?
To be honest with you, I would rather have Chris Carson. If I could guarantee that he would be healthy the whole time, but you can't. So
you can't guarantee any player.
Well, this is true, but we do know that.
So you'd rather have Rashad Penny?
Okay, yeah.
That's essentially that's what you're saying.
Yeah, but here's the thing: I can't really say that necessarily 100% because people just. I can't say it 100%. I do want Penny over Chris Carson, but.
Right.
I know that everyone, because of what I personally in our league of record took Penny, and so I get this notion of course Johnny wants Penny, but I think that he is. I know what I saw in college, and he was electrifying in college. And so
absolutely.
If he
absolutely.
can
there's a lot of guys that were
and then he came in and he was overweight and he was trying to do too much on the field, and they basically said, okay, you're not going to run more. Now they got rid of Mike Davis left. He went to Chicago, and we talk about the percentage of that breakdown. He got, Mike Davis got 21% of the market share in Seattle. That equated to 180 total rushing attempts, and that was close to Alvin Kamara's rushing attempts. So if you gave that to Rashad Penny, that's pretty good in fantasy. You'd want to see that happen.
Right.
I think that Penny is the greater value right now. I think if Chris Carson continues to run the way he does, he's going to get hurt again. Yeah, but Chris Carson's not a bad bet to start off your fantasy season, because in that offense which ran the second most in the NFL last year, you're going to want a piece of that.
Mm-hmm. Before we jump into this one, I heard you mention something about James Conner earlier.
Yeah, so I was getting back into that one. So let me find that note. But basically, there's been a couple reports, right, that have come out this year. Let's start from the very end of last year.
Sure,
right?
sure.
So James Conner goes down with the lower body, the lower leg injury last year. Right. This is 3 weeks of time. Okay. And in that time, Jalen Samuels becomes the guy, a converted tight end into running back, that kind of takes over for the Steelers, right? Mm-hmm. And so the Steelers are then looking.
Oh, big Travis.
Sorry.
Yeah, he needs to fuel me.
Yeah, I got to get a beer. So anyways, so then Samuels takes over, right? We know this story. And then he takes over. He's very effective. Connor gets back in for week 17, back into his lead dog role. Doesn't do a ton, but he gets those carries again. And then in the offseason, the Steelers go and hire Jalen Samuels, former running backs coach in college, as their running backs coach here. And so what does that say? Well, then in OTAs, they're using multiple back sets. It's not something Tomlin does, okay? But they are trying to adapt and do this more. And then most recently, James Conner comes out and tells the media that the carries are going to be split pretty evenly. So now I just have to ask, we've seen Conner sit there at the first round now behind Le'Veon Bell and kind of before Joe Mixon. And I have to ask, should we be concerned about James Brown?
You know what? I love all of them. I love all the news coming out. I love how it played out last year. And the funny thing is that the reason why James Conner was so effective as well as focused on is because it was essentially like spite against Le'Veon Bell. They're like, we're going to show you that you don't necessarily have to be the guy that can
we could
produce.
put any running
we could
back
put any
yeah.
exactly. We could put somebody in the system and somebody's going to produce as long as they're talented enough. And I do believe going into this next season that is exactly true. That there is going to be a certain timeshare now that the whole Le'Veon Bell situation has blown over. Would I draft James Conner? Absolutely. Would I draft him in the first round? Most likely not. But if like coming into training camp, because obviously nobody's going to start drafting that early in the preseason, but coming into the preseason, you start seeing this split where they are splitting carries, and James Conner's draft stock, falls back to maybe second, third round, and I'd be okay with taking a piece of him around there, late second, third round, and then then the season comes along and you find out like, well, maybe one guy is the guy, and if you got that guy, then there you go, you got a tremendous value for a guy that potentially could have been a first round pick in the second or third round.
Yeah, no, I love that take there, Matt. If his draft stock could dive a little bit because of this news, you'd love that. For me, I'm not seeing a scenario. I mean, I don't think that they're going to bring Samuels in 50-50.
No.
Or even 60-40, in my opinion.
No.
And I think what happens here is Samuels takes up some of the load that's left from the massive Antonio Brown hole that's in this offense. He is a converted tight end. I think they'll use him a lot in space as a satellite back, as Johnny was talking about what they wanted to do in Seattle. But I think James Conner in the first round is a little dangerous.
Right.
As dangerous now as a Le'Veon Bell who's taken time off, or a Joe Mixon who's on a Bengals offense, and it doesn't really inspire that, really good feeling that those top five guys give you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with your take, especially because, I mean, if you look at history, even though they might have hired a running backs coach that was Samuel's previous coach, ultimately, it's Tomlin's team,
right?
And regardless
he
of
plays,
but he does get to decide of where players fill in what role.
Exactly. I was referring to Samuel's coach,
running back coach.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't.
He's not calling the plays.
Right.
And then what I also want to add is that
recent history.
Well, and look, everyone wants to point out, oh, James Conner got injured and all. Well, okay, they were giving him Le'Veon Bell carries. This guy didn't know.
No, his usage was
Le'Veon Bell got injured on Le'Veon Bell.
Right,
carries.
Exactly.
But it's like this guy essentially was a rookie. He played a few snaps here and there when Le'Veon Bell went out. But
I love
let's remember that even Le'Veon Bell said that James Conner reminds him of himself.
Stupid. That's such a big-headed comment.
It is, but
you know what I mean?
Le'Veon Bell.
So big-headed.
But
I mean,
what I
know it's Le'Veon. It's such a big-headed comment. I don't like that.
The point that I want to make is that I don't care what kind of shape you're in. Nobody can go from, okay, I'm the backup running back to all of a sudden you're going to be giving me 30 to, didn't he have 40 something touches in one of the first few weeks? It's like you can't go from thinking you're going to be a backup to getting the ball, over 250 times and not break down. You were not expecting that. You didn't train your body.
I want to talk a little bit about that, right? Because Matt just hit it there. Le'Veon Bell got hurt on Le'Veon Bell usage.
Yeah.
So James Conner got hurt on Le'Veon Bell usage, or should we say Mike Tomlin?
Right.
Okay.
I like that better.
So Mike Tomlin usage hurt Le'Veon Bell. It hurt James Conner. And so now we're getting to a point where they found something in Jalen Samuels. And maybe, yes, they will not do what Mike Tomlin has always done. But and just give him, 90, 80% of this market share.
Right.
But I just don't think that it's going to be this wild transition to 50-50 next year. And I think that James Conner is going to get a little bit disrespected because of a lot of this news. And this dude is going to be, I think this is what this is all about. Jalen Samuels coming on in this offense is to protect a guy like James Conner, makes the Steelers more versatile as a football team. And they saw it. I think, when they were in the thick of that playoff hunt in week 14 is when, James Conner went down. And so basically, they lose that division to the Baltimore Ravens and they go, what happened to us? Well, we ran our back in around and really, effed up our offense. So I think that there's a case to be made that the Steelers are trying to protect themselves by working in more backs
and
here.
Also, could it be the fact that they plan on running the ball more? I mean, Ben Roethlisberger threw the ball 600 times, and maybe they're like, okay, we don't have Antonio Brown anymore. Yes, we have Juju, but what if they take? What if they?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think really going to change.
Yeah, that's my point.
I think sorry to cut you off, but like you brought up a point earlier talking about the when you're doing your mock with Donte Moncrief coming in, and I think that was a incredibly solid pickup by the Steelers.
Yeah,
in order to kind of balance out that passing attack where Moncrief is I wouldn't say he's pedestrian. He's a good wide receiver. He's proven it in the league, and he's been able to score.
And people are sleeping on Moncrief because he had Blake Bortles last year.
But here's the thing: I know that we talk about Moncrief being this touchdown machine, but my question is, he really
a touchdown machine?
He's had 21 touchdowns in his entire career, and he's played for 5 years. That's not a good average.
Okay, well, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Okay.
How many of those years did he have Andrew Luck?
He had,
I think, only two.
And what was his highest touchdown total that year?
Right, but keep in mind, he was with the abysmal Jaguars last year.
He was with the Jaguars. He was also with Andrew Luck when Andrew Luck wasn't there, so meaning he was with Jacoby Brissett. And meaning he was with Matt Hasselbeck.
Over this span, you're right. Like the numbers don't reflect it. But as far as the seasons that he's been able to produce, he's definitely been startable.
Yes.
And I think, I'm not necessarily saying that he's going to be startable on the Steelers by any means.
Right.
Obviously, Juju is going to be filling that role of the wide receiver that you want from the Steelers. Okay. What I'm saying is that they got another guy to start alongside Juju, like Juju started alongside Antonio. Obviously, the caliber of player is a little bit different, but it's still going to be able to allow them to run their offense the way that they normally like to run their offense.
Yeah,
because they got a player to where, I mean, if you remember Hayward Bay used to fulfill that same type of role right next to,
and even the brief stint of Martavius Bryant, they are good at evaluating talent at the wide receiver position, whether it's drafting, whether it's building up, whether it's acquiring. And I trust in Pittsburgh to do that. But not to make this the Pittsburgh Steelers show.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, to wrap it up, James Conner, worthy of drafting in the first round. I wouldn't take him if he ends up slipping because of training camp battles. Definitely take him in the late second, third round. Totally worth it. Samuels, rosterable. I would definitely draft him later on as a handcuff, even not as a handcuff.
You could see him kind of emerging
even
as,
if I
as
didn't Connor, I'm still interested in Samuels as a late round flyer.
All right, so I want to move on to this next piece of news, keeping it running back and in that second to third round range. Leonard Fournette, he's an interesting case here, a guy that has tremendous upside.
Right.
Tremendous upside. He just has not been able to, knock off either the off the field or on the field crap, I should say. Off the field, on the field stuff. Leonard Fournette here with the foot injuries as well. He's very enticing this year because of his value, going late in the second, early third.
Yeah.
And so, the Jaguars are coming out here. Leonard Fournette expects to be a big part of the Jaguars' passing game. Johnny, this is something we talk about quite a bit.
Yeah.
Leonard Fournette is a guy that can catch the football, surprisingly, to some people.
Yeah, but not only that, but Nick Foles came out and said,
Right, and that's what I was going to get to
throwing
here.
the
Yeah.
ball to my running
Yep.
backs.
Right.
And so I just think that do we need to start evaluating Leonard Fournette as a guy you try and build your team around, getting him in that second and third round?
Oh.
All right.
Trust me. I am very high on Leonard Fournette this year. I definitely think that he is due for a bounce back. Not to say that he hasn't been able to produce,
right.
But I definitely think he is due for a bounce back. I think is TJ Yeldon still with the team?
No,
TJ Yeldon's
not, so
did Yeldon go to Buffalo?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that definitely boosts his value this year, especially like they're saying as far as the passing game.
Yeah. But Alfred Blue's in Jacksonville.
They got Alfred Blue?
Yeah, they did. But
I don't.
He was so excited about it. Too.
Alfred Blue.
No, I mean,
my boy
like
Blue.
This a lot. Like, right. I like this a lot. I think like where he's being drafted right now is exactly where he should be drafted. Round.
But okay, so let me spit out a couple of these guys here. Let's do a little ADP.
See,
while
you're doing the ADP track, I tend to disagree with Matt in that.
Why?
Ooh.
I do think that you can. Let's not remember
build your team around Leonard Fournette.
Not build your. I think if you decide to go wide receiver in your first 2 rounds.
Well, here's what I'll say about Fournette because he's the back of the second. So Johnny, it would be hard for you to go wide receiver in that first round if you're getting Fournette at 210 right now in standard leagues because you would have had to have passed on one of the mega bosses. In the top 5, so you're
sure.
Zeke.
I see what you're saying.
Saquon. So you're taking running back here. What I'm saying is, if you're going running back heavy, let's just talk about these running backs that are here. We've got Damian Williams at 207, Leonard Fournette at 210, and Marlon Mack at 212, with Derrick Henry and Devonta Freeman there. So that's like these are very enticing guys. That's why they're landing right here. I kind of feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is actually a little bit on the other side of round 2, where round 2 was last year. If you look at round 2 last year, Jordan Howard, Dalvin Cook were at the end of round 1, beginning of round 2.
Okay.
And now you're getting guys like that who had the upside of those two in the back of the second this year. And obviously things are going to change. We're in June right now, but I kind of like where all these guys are at. I feel like your value to get something like Damian Williams to the mid end of second round.
Yeah. I love the Kansas City backfield. I know I'm transitioning from, we're talking about to Damian Williams. I love the Kansas City backfield. I don't love Damian Williams.
I can't give. I am 100% behind him.
And that's perfectly fine. Like it is a system.
Here's what I'll tell you. I'm 100% behind Andy. Running back for Andy Reid.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to.
Right.
And I'm really 100% behind what Damian Williams was able to accomplish in the back end of last year, and not just the last part of the regular season into the playoffs.
I'm gonna be very transparent with how I believe you should draft a Kansas City running back. Okay. Very transparent.
Coming from a guy who has drafted multiple Kansas City running backs.
I picked second round before anybody even built up that train. And the reason why I picked Kareem Hunt in the second round is because I watched the preseason. I watched how Andy Reid was going to be deploying the offense after Spencer Ware went down. And until I actually see how that backfield shakes out during the preseason, because Andy Reid's very transparent in regards to how the offense is going to be run in training camp.
Well, I'm glad Matt brought this up.
So keep an eye on Damian Williams in regards to how they run the offense training camp, because if Carlos Hyde starts seeing a more bulk of a carries, or if even some wild card.
Well, they've drafted the Dexter Williams, I think his name is. So he
starts seeing like a bulk of carries. This might be a backfield that hasn't actually had a lead guy determined.
Yeah.
So Damian Williams, if he is the guy, totally worth the pick and where he's being drafted. If he's not the guy, you might have just swallowed a rotten egg.
Nobody wants to do that, but
Nobody
I will
wants to do
say that what the Chiefs have done is come out, given Damian Williams a lot of the football in their home run stretch last
True.
year in the playoffs. They trusted him there, and he performed well.
Right.
And Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, has already come out this offseason screaming at the media, basically saying he's our starter. We expect him to excel. Now, Matt's point is correct, and I'm glad he brought it up because you need to be watching the preseason. Matt actually writes an article that's great about why you should watch the preseason, what you should be watching for.
Every team's different. Keep in mind.
Yes, and you want to know the coaches, right? You want to know the schemes and what they're going to be doing. But my point here is to say it's Damian Williams' job to lose.
Right.
It is his job to lose. And yes, he has not always been a starting running back, right? He was always a journeyman backup. But for me, I feel I have a lot of confidence seeing what I saw out of him.
Well,
for him to lose in this offense.
And getting back to our main topic here, Travis, I think the way that it's actually mapped out right now in ADP is essentially how I would rank them too, right? So I would have Damian Williams ahead of Leonard Fournette, and then I would take Leonard Fournette before Marlon Mack, and I would take Marlon Mack before Freeman. I think that the way that now where it comes into question for me. And I want to ask you guys the same question, is Jones. Jones is going right around there as well for the Green Bay Packers.
Aaron Jones?
Aaron Jones.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's in that cluster. So what's your confidence level on Jones compared to Leonard Fournette?
I mean, this is
Tua
another thing
Mack.
This is another thing that, Travis brought up earlier. It's right now, Green Bay is going through a transition, and it's very difficult to necessarily say that where Jones is, ADP is going to be worth the squeeze. The juice going to be worth the squeeze.
I'm just saying, I'm looking here, and I look at P, and his upside's great. Don't get me wrong. Like, this guy has the electric style of running. And 2 years ago, only Alvin Kamara had more run plays for more than 20 yards than Aaron Jones, who didn't even play the complete season. So that's 2 years ago. And then coming into last year, we saw him average plus 5 yards a carry, 5 yards or more carry. He was fantastic. Mike McCarthy just would not give him the ball. So we know what's there for Aaron Jones. But I will say this, man. We see these coaches want to implement systems over players, right? Mm-hmm. Systems over talent, so to speak. They want to put talent in the right position, so to speak. And so for me, I have trepidation. I want to see what, Matt LaFleur wants to do with his offense. A lot of preseason. I'll be watching a lot of that offense in the preseason.
I like Matt LaFleur, to be honest with you. And it's very conducive to running back success. Obviously, my enthusiasm with Derrick Henry last year was rooted from them getting LaFleur from obviously the Rams. And I definitely think that they can be successful. It's another thing to keep in mind. This is another one of those things where I want to see how the preseason shakes out before I actually make a final decision on a player like Aaron Jones. Would I be okay with taking him in the third round? Possibly.
Right.
Would I be more comfortable taking him somewhere in the fourth round?
When I just look at those guys ahead of them, Devonta Freeman, Derrick Henry, Marlon Mack, Leonard Fournette, I am comfortable taking all those guys ahead of Aaron Jones because of established roles. Like when he got his role finally at the back half of last year, he got hurt.
Right.
And that was his second year in a row getting dinged up because Jamal Williams the year before got, when Aaron Jones got dinged up, Jamal Williams got a ton of volume and looked good with volume. Didn't look great as a running back. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about our last guy here. I want to talk about is Marlon Mack. We saw here in the news that beat writers out of Indy said that Frank Reich wants Marlon Mack to carry the load for them. Mm-hmm. And so we need to start asking, because this is another team with a stable of running backs in Nyheim Hines, in Jordan Wilkins, and now they brought in Spencer Ware. Not saying Spencer Ware has a ton left in the tank, but there are guys behind Mack, and Mack has not been the model of health in his career. So is the upside just too worth it for Mack that you have to kind of take that stab because he's a running back in that Indy offense?
I mean, I believe you have to.
Right?
I believe you have to, and there's going to be somebody that is going to obviously bite at that bait. I like Marlon Mack. I think he's a great player. I think he's he is capable of doing it, and we've seen that he's capable of doing it.
I mean, that stretch last year,
Right? Like,
I mean,
Here's
the
what's-
volume, the way they used him in the passing game, even though they had Naheem.
right. Obviously, Josh Ferguson, or excuse me, Jordan Wilkins.
Yeah.
And then obviously Ware do offer that early down skill set, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think Andrew Luck wants to have a revolving door of players. I think Andrew Luck wants to be able to build chemistry. With
He wants to know when he
players.
turns to
right,
what guy's going to be there, right?
So if Marlon Mack can prove to be a little bit more consistently healthy, definitely think he's worth the value there. Obviously, there is going to be somebody spelling him every once in a while, but I don't see Frank Reich being the guy that's just going to say that they want him to be the guy, and then all of a sudden, they throw a smoke bomb, and the next thing you know is it's some guy that you didn't even have roster,
Right.
or nobody had roster.
You know what's
Johnny, what's your
crazy?
take on Mac?
Here's what's kind of crazy. I was on Twitter the other day, and I was getting into a discussion on one of our fans about Marlon Mack, and I think you guys touched on it big time, or a little earlier, and it was the volume. And what I found was if Marlon Mack touched the ball at least 19 times. He did that, I believe, 4 times. And in all 4 of those games, he had over 100 yards rushing. And it wasn't just over 100. It was over 119 yards rushing when he touched the ball over 19 times. When he touched the ball less than 19 times, he was reliant on touchdowns in order to make his fantasy value for that day. But the crazy thing was that when he didn't touch the ball 14 times, less than 19, those games he scored at least 1 or 2 touchdowns. So it's like you're getting that you're getting those points somehow, either through touchdowns or through the volume. And with this offense and with this offensive line, I think that this defense is also getting better. I think that they could start running the ball more, and I do think that we can believe what Reich is saying because let's face it, last year the Colts organization came out and said, I think Marlon Mack can run for, I think they said 1,500 yards or something like that. It was insane, and we literally all laughed as a fantasy community. We're like, very funny. Have you seen Marlon Mack play? And then guess what? Like they came out and they gave him the rock. And when they did that, he showed that he can be really explosive. There are pieces there. Nyheim Hines is a very good player. I've been high on him since last year in preseason. I like what he can do. But let's be honest, he's not a between the tackles guy.
Okay. Right.
Jordan Wilkins is more of a he's a backup.
He's like a change of pace guy.
He's a change of pace, and so I think that Marlon Mack, barring injury, yes, he will be a very, very solid running back. And like we always say, it's very hard to judge a guy based on injury. Sorry?
Sorry to cut you off. I'm going to be honest, though. I believe that if you were to take Marlon Mack and put him in a different situation where he didn't have such a nice line and such a talented back, that he wouldn't be able to produce at the levels.
Right.
That
I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
But he's not. He's going to be on this team, so that's why we don't really have to worry about that too much. But
I'm just talking from just overall perspective.
Yeah, I think we're talking his talent. Yeah, but that's a great example of how when a situation meets good enough talent,
right?
Just good enough talent, it's good, and that's where I think the same stance to go back to Damian Williams.
True.
We don't love Damian Williams' talent. But we love that system. We love that he's playing for Andy Reid, and we love that Andy Reid.
And let's face it, he's the best running back.
Patrick Mahomes.
Let's face it, he's the best running back in that
as far
backfield.
as a top tier quarterback.
Well, I mean, if
McNabb had
that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, right.
I mean, like I think he decided to kind of change up his offense these past few years because now he's away from dink and dunk Alex Smith, and even Alex Smith at the tail end of his
right
Kansas
was
City
trying to
years
go
was
deep
actually,
to prove.
Oh,
He's like, Mahomes is
hey,
here.
That's the
I
ultimate.
like that take.
Yeah.
I like that take.
That's what I feel like it was. It's like you. Watch
Oh
this.
yeah. Well, not as deep as Mahomes, but I
Uncle
can throw
Rico.
deep.
Shit. All right, Whisper Nation, we appreciate you jumping on here with us. If you guys want to hear more takes on any of these guys we talked about or anybody else you'd like to hear us talk about, please hit us in the comments below. If you're listening to us on Spotify or the podcast apps across the Apple or Google devices, go ahead and leave us a review there. Let us know how we did. We appreciate it big time. And of course, if you want any other content, hit us on the fantasywhisperers.com. Matt, we had so much fun today. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
We loved your article there, the top 2019 fantasy rookies. We know you got some more stuff in the works, so we appreciate that. If you want to follow Matt, check him out at MP Fantasy Sports, also at Mateo_Rex on Instagram. That's Johnny Game Time Hicks. This is Mateo himself, and I'm Big Travie. We're out. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.